Howdy! How are you doing, guys? How are you doing, gals? Today we are going to be talking about passing parameters through the URL to a backend application that we write with Node.js. So we are going to focus on the Node.js side, and I'm going to show you the two ways to do that. One is with get, that's the most common way to use parameters on the URL, but you can also pass parameters in the URL with post. Of course, with post you can also pass parameters in the body, especially when you don't want those parameters to be visible to the, let's say, the observer that's interested in finding information that you don't want it to be found. So in those cases, you want it to pass all the information in the post, in the body of the post. What you place in the URL, it can be discovered one way or another one. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to give superpowers to our Node.js application. For that, we are going to import Express. So we do import Express from Express. And I want to emphasize that we are using the modular approach. We're using a module, a JavaScript module. That's why my application is called app.mjs. Then you don't need to choose any switch. Just by calling it MJS, I'm telling Node that this is a module, not a regular JavaScript application. The modules have some particularities, and among them, and the most useful of them, is that we can use the ES6 syntax and just use import, not have to deal with the requires. Much more clear in my mind. So once we imported the Express, the next thing we want to do is initialize Express. How do we do that? We define, let me place the focus here, we define the new variable that by convention we call app, and we say app equal express method. We invoke the express method and assign it to the variable app. The next thing we need to do is we need to actually create a listener or a server to listen to whoever is trying to communicate with us. For that, we do the app.listen, and we use the port. For the port, we are going to use the port that we defined in package.json. We did that in a previous video, and you can check in the description all the links to all the previous videos where we talk about all these things and our primer to Node and package.json, etc. But just very quickly, what we did is we have a script. And in the script, we are using the Node environment variable that when it is in the development mode, okay, we start with npm run dev. So we go in this, we invoke this script, and then it's going to define two environmental variables. One is going to set up the Node environment to development, and another one is going to set up the Node port to 5000. And then it's going to call the application with nodemon app.mjs. That means our application is going to be invoked not with Node like during production, but with nodemon. Nodemon is another package that we install that detects every time we change the application, MJS, of course we change it and we save it, it's going to detect that and it's going to recompile and restart the application. All those things we explain in our Node primer. That's in another video and you can find the link in the description. So if we go back to our app.mjs file, we are going to set up a listen, and the listen we are going to set up to port process.m.node_port. That's the variable we defined in the package.json. Also listen, the method listen is going to have a callback function that after it finishes connecting the listener, the server, to this port, is going to invoke this function. For now, we are not going to use any parameter provided by this function. We are going to use an arrow function, and we are just going to use it to report in the console that we started the server. So I'm going to use a shortcut from Visual Studio Code, console log, and here we are going to say server started and listening to port, and here we are going to repeat process.m.node_port. Let's test if I made any mistake. So we go here and we start our application. How do we do that? Very simple, npm run dev. And we start it in the development mode. Okay, so node monitor started, and now it's telling us it's listening to port 5000. But hold a second, it's not working. It's reading an old application that I wrote before starting this video. I know that because it says listening to port, and it should say server started and listening to port. So what happened here? I forgot to save it. So to save it in the Mac is Command S, in the Windows is Control S. So we save it, and now it says server started and listening to port 5000 because now it's actually reading our application. Be careful with that. I keep on forgetting about saving, so you may see more of this during the video. So once we have the server running, let's create a route. And we're going to create a route on a get route. So we're going to say app.get. So that is going to listen to get requests. And we're going to define this route as test. Okay? And for now, we are not going to do anything else, except this has a callback function also, meaning when it connects to the route, it detects a request to get to this route, is going to call, once connected, this callback function. And the callback function is going to provide us with two parameters that we are going to call request and response. You can write request and response, doesn't matter, because these parameters are being provided by the callback function. And we write the callback function, meaning we get to decide what is done once this request is made, once this route is invoked and we are inside this callback function. So now in our callback function, we are just going to do something very simple. We are going to log and say log, the shortcut, and we say receive a request in test. Okay? Just very stupid, very simple. We don't do anything else. Okay? We don't need the semicolon at the end. I prefer not to use them. Sometimes you need to, but most of the time you don't. So we just save this now. Remember to save. And then we go to a browser, any browser. Okay. So we go here and we go to localhost. Okay. And we invoke the route test. Okay. We do enter. And let's make our first observation. The page never finishes loading. See how it keeps on trying and it gives us the X to stop it. It doesn't finish loading. Why? Because if you look at our code, then even though we receive the request, you can see the console log, okay? It's printing what we said. So the request was received, the function, the callback function was invoked, and our code was executed. We didn't send the response. So if we want the loading of the page to finish, we need to send a response. The response needs to be sent something like response.status that tells the browser that invoked this route what was the situation, and here is a 200 because effectively there was an active route here, and we need to send something. It could be a blank page, or we can have something like, for instance, howdy. And when we do that, let's save it, okay? And now, howdy, see, our local request, I refresh this, same thing. And look at how this finishes immediately because now it gets a response, so it knows everything was successful. And it's receiving our response in the screen. We could send a file, we could send an HTML file, we could do a lot of things with our response. So let's get to our stuff now. What we want to do is we want to show you how to transfer data from the client application to the backend application. One way to do that is in the URL, and we are going to explore that first, transfer data in the URL. When we are transferring data in the URL, there are two ways to do it. One is as a parameter. So you can have it as a parameter in the path itself. So we just use a colon, and we say parameter or par1. Okay, and this is going to be the first parameter that we can transfer. How do we recover this parameter? It's relatively easy. We are just going to show it with the console log. Okay, console log parameter 1 equals, and here we do a request Remember these are variables that get passed to us inside the callback function or to the callback function, and we can do with them whatever we want. The request is an object that the get method from app that is Express provides us. So we do request dot params dot par1, and this is going to be the parameter 1. Okay. Now we save this and we go to the console and start this with npm run dev. We are going to run it on the development mode. Now it's listening. We go to our browser. Okay. And now we open a new window and we do local host 5000/test. But now you have a parameter, meaning the next part of the path that we send is going to be a parameter. So I'm going to send this is parameter 1. Okay? And we pass this. The reply is the same one than before. And let's look at the console. And here it is, parameter 1. This is parameter 1. We got it in the backend, in the server, in our Node application. Can we pass more than one parameter in this way? Oh, absolutely. We can have another one and say parameter 2, colon, parameter 2. So all we do here, and then we need to do the console log, and we just copy this, Command C, Command B, and we change this to parameter 2, and here we change it to par2, because we wrote here par2. This needs to be equal to this part, because it ends up becoming a property of the object params, that is a property params of the object request that gets passed to us into the callback function that we are basically writing the code for right now. So how do we pass a second parameter? Simple. We just do slash here. Oops. We do slash here, backslash, and we say this is parameter 2. And here you can see that we are going to keep on adding stuff. So for now, this parameter 2. Oh, the error is I didn't save it. Sorry for that. So we go here, we pass it again. Howdy, now it works. So we go back and we look at the console, and you have this parameter 1, and the one we added, this is parameter 2. Okay, let's say now that we want to pass an object as a parameter. How do we do that? Oh, very simple. Here we can do another backslash, indicate that there's another parameter coming, and we can call this anything. I'm going to call him this, I don't know, patata, to illustrate that it can be called anything, okay? I'm going to save it, okay? And we need to also do something with this parameter so we can demonstrate to you that the parameter is coming. We do console.log, and we say here object patata is equal to. And here we are going to write request.params.patata, because that's the object. But one thing that we can see immediately, okay, when we do this, is that, okay, I forgot to add the colon here. There we go. One thing that we can see immediately is that when it gets this parameter is going to be a JSON form. So we need to parse it. For that, we use the function JSON.parse, and we parse this, and we console log the parsed parameter. Okay, and that is an object. So here is JSON. There we go. I took it too literally. Now when we send information here, now we already sent 2 parameters. We are going to send a 3rd parameter. So we say, for instance, flower red okay? Flower rose, color red. And here the browser is changing the curly brackets for us, but we can use the curly brackets for their escape codes. So let's use the curly brackets, okay? So we basically send the object in JSON form, okay? And when we send the object in the JSON form, again, accepted, howdy, the route was accepted. And we come here and we have object patata is flower rose color red. Of course, this object can be named anything you want. You can also pass variables by modifying the URL to actually explicitly indicate that you're going to be passing variables. And how do you do that? Okay, we go to the URL, and now rather than adding parameters like we were doing before to the path of our URL, we just use the question mark. And with the question mark, we are basically saying that what follows is a variable. So we can pass a variable. Let's say we say variable 1, okay, equal violet. Okay? And if we do enter, this is going to actually get a reply. Howdy, no problem. The route is going to get executed because it was a variable that came. But we didn't read it. We have nothing here to actually read that variable. Do we need to modify the route? No, because the route didn't change. We just added a variable with a question mark. So what we need to do now is just read the variable. Where does it come? That variable. How can we read it? Oh, it comes in the request object. Where in the request object? Okay, in the query property. So we do console log.log, and we say variable 1 is equal, and here we do request.query var1, and this needs to be equal, okay, to the name of the variable we gave in the URL when we passed the information that we use var1. If we go back, you can say we just wrote here var1 equal violet. So we need to use var1 here. So now we save this, okay, it recompiles, executes, we are ready, we come here, we send this, okay, and of course the response doesn't change, but we can come here and see on the console that variable 1 was received and is violet. So now the question is, can we pass more than one variable? And the answer is yes, absolutely. So how do we do this? Okay, here we just need to read them. How many are we going to pass? Let's say we pass variable n, 1, 2, 3, 4. We just need to read them. If we want to use them, we don't have, it's not mandatory that we read them. So we can actually write console log variable is equal, and now we say request dot query dot variable n, and that's going to show us in the console what we are doing. And now we can, let's save this, so it recompiles and it's ready to receive. And now here we pass variable 1. To pass another variable, we say and, okay? And we say variable 2 equal nothing, and variable n equal something, okay? And now we send it. Of course, we got the reply, howdy, that means everything went okay. And we go here and we can say variable 1 is violet, variable n is something, okay? Maybe I should have here variable n to make sure we see that display in the console. We just need to do a refresh here, go back to the console, and we'll see variable n is something. See, variable 2 or whatever variables were between variable 1 and variable n were skipped because it's a query. So in the query, we are just looking for whatever, okay, we are naming. If we just go to, we read whatever variables we need to, and then we display them. The next question is, can we pass an object like we did in the parameters, basically in the URL? Can we pass an object in the variables? Absolutely. All we need to do is to stringify whatever object we want, and then we put it on the URL under a variable. We can't pass very complex objects, especially if they have methods in them, of course. But we can pass relatively complex objects using stringify and then using the JSON.parse. Let me give you an example with a simple object. We are going to add it here, so we say console.log, and we say variable object is equal req.query dot, let's call this one object. We can call it anything we want, but let's call it object. And now we need to parse it like we did before in the parameters. So we just need to do JSON.parse and parse this, and we'll get our object. So let's demonstrate this, or let's save it so it recompiles. Let's demonstrate this here. We have our variable to something, and now we are object equal, we open the curly brackets, and we write it in the form of a JSON, and we say property 1, and we say red, comma, property 2, and we say blue, and we close the curly brackets. And that's a simple object, but for the demonstration should suffice. Of course, we are going to keep on getting the howdy because we haven't done anything with the response yet. If we come here, we are going to see variable object is property 1 red, property 2 blue, so we recovered our object. Okay, like the same thing we did with the patata object before, flower rose color red, it's still there, and this was passed as a parameter. These last three were passed as variables. Of course, there was another one that we never read. Now, before we jump to something else, let me show you how we can change the response, and I'm going to use template strings to actually do it because it's something that I want to demonstrate, and it's also the easiest way to do it. So we build a template string using the backtick, okay? The backtick. And then between these two backticks, we can write strings, and we can add between curly brackets with a $, we can add JavaScript code. Before we get into the template string writing, we are going to do a couple of things to help us out. We are going to define the objects as variables, constants, and we are going to say constant patata equal JSON.parse, and we're going to do the req.params.patata. And then we are going to also create the object equal JSON.parse request.query, this time because it comes with the variables, .object. Okay, so now we are ready to go into the expansion in the template string. We use the backticks, and what is between backticks is a template string. For that, we can mix basically characters ASCII with variables, JavaScript variables, doing what I'm going to show you. So we just write parameter 1 equal, and then we do $, curly braces, and between these curly braces we can have JavaScript code or variables. In this particular case, we are going to do request params dot parameter 1, okay, and we are going to create a line break. Since this is HTML, we use the line break tag, and then we put parameter 2, okay, same thing, open the curly braces, and here we will go request.params.par2, okay, and we keep on going, the line break tag, and we could keep on writing all of the variables to save time. I'm going to just cut and paste. I have this built before, and here we have all our variables. The only point that I want to emphasize for you is I had to expand the objects into its properties, in particular this case, patata.flower. Okay, let's see. I'm having doubts if it's the correct name. I will use the name so ridiculous to emphasize that it can be anything that you want. The variable object, patata, yeah, patata dot flower and patata dot color. And then here we have the query for variable 1, the query for variable n, and then we also expand the object.property1 and object.property2. If we didn't do this, then the template string will not expand the object and we will just get object rather than getting the properties of the object in the message on the screen. So now we save this, Control S, it recompiles, it's ready, listening. We just refresh the screen and you get all the parameters. They were there already because I done this before. I can go back and then go forward again, refresh, demonstrate to you that this is actually working. And we get everything that we typed in the URL. It's actually displayed in the browser. I hope you enjoy this and this is helpful for you. In the next video, I'm going to be talking about how to deal with the body. I also want to note something. Please note that I did not have to use a URL encoded in Express. It's just built in. You don't need to do anything about it. It's built in. Thank you for your attention. See you around.